In this video, everything you need to know about building a steam shower, including a heated floor. Okay, so got a master bathroom to do here. Steam shower with a sloped ceiling. So I'm going to put all the curdy board up here. It's going to be a bench seat over here. 12 by 24 on a tile. 16 by 30 on the walls. So this is a tile for the ceiling, and this is the tile for the shower walls. Okay, so I got all the curdy board up. So I have several videos that show exactly how to do this. Okay, so this is the tile. It's going on the ceiling. So here I'm actually using Tech Superflex, which is a very high polymer content thin set. It's a good thin set for setting glass tile. So this is actually a steam shower. So what that means is that the waterproofing has to be much more stringent than it would be for just a regular shower. The steam can penetrate into the cavities of the wall much more than just regular water. So the perm rating of the substrate you're using has to be adequate for steam showers. You can't just put up, say, like a cement backer board and tile it and expect there to be no penetration of moisture into the wall cavity. You have to actually make sure that you get something that's adequate for a steam shower. Schluter curdy board is actually rated for steam in a residential setting. If this were a continuous functioning steam shower, then you would have to use Curdy DS, which is a thicker membrane. But for a residential setting, the curdy board is actually fine. A lot of other membranes and liquid membranes are not, so you got to be very careful. Okay, so here I'm using a piece of curdy board to lift the tile into place so that I can set the entire sheet into the thin set all at once. And the reason I do this is because if you try and do it by hand, the sheet is folding and flopping down, and you get one corner in, and as you try and lift it, it pulls. It's very difficult to get it to set. This way you can get the whole sheet to contact the thin set all at once, and it will stay up that way. And then I use a float to press it in and rub it into the thin set so you get good contact, and the sheet won't come off the ceiling that way. But the key is to use a flat piece of either a piece of plywood or a piece of curdy board, whatever you've got on hand, to bring the sheet flat up to the ceiling. Now on this sheet, you'll see me rubbing the sheet with the float. Normally on glass mosaic tile on the regular mesh that they have, you wouldn't want to rub it. You just want to push it in, because rubbing it would actually move the tile. But the mesh on this is very tight, and the glass is actually very rigid on this particular tile, so the tiles don't actually move. They're kind of tight together. Okay, so that's the ceiling. So next, I'm going to put the tar paper and the wire down and install the drain. Because I forgot to turn my camera on when I put the tar paper and wire lab down and glued in the drain, I'm going to use footage from another shower that I did. And then once that's done, I'll come back to the footage of this shower and continue. What you do is you put felt paper or some plastic, whatever, to protect the plywood, and what that does is it stops the plywood absorbing the moisture out of the mud when you put it in. So, once you put the felt paper down, and then you put the wire down, and you always want to wear gloves when dealing with the wire, because it can really cut very easily. So I already pre-cut this. Now I'm going to fit the drain. Okay, so I glued this piece on here. You cut the pipe to size. You use the cleaner to clean it, and then the cement to cement the parts, and then you just press it into place. Okay, so level that way and level that way. I'll tweak a little bit when I put the mud in. But you want that to be level? And then I got a test plug in there. Once I get the mud on and the membrane on, I'm going to flood test it to make sure I have no leaks. So I'm using Mapei 4-to-1 for my mud mix, and this is specifically made for shower floors and wherever you need a deck mud. It's a better product than sand topping mix that you would get at a box store, because it's it's got a finer sand and etc. But you can use those other products if you need to. I just prefer this. So when you're mixing deck mud, you want to mix it rather dry. It still needs to be wet, but it doesn't want to be soaking wet. You want to have it so you mix it, and then it'll stay. When you compress it into a ball in your hand, it'll keep its shape, but there's no water coming out of it. You want it to be fairly dry. You don't want it to be soaking wet and saturated. And that's how you mix deck mud. So you just basically add the mud to your tub, then you add the water, and you just chop it back and forward with a hoe from one side to the other. Get it very well mixed, and then it's ready to go. Okay, so I'm going to go back and forth between this shower and the other shower that I was showing how to install the drain, to explain how to install the mud up in the shower. It's the same process every time, and it's just that I have a little more, a better explanation on that video than I do on this one. So I'm going to go back and forth so that you don't get confused, but the process is exactly the same. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a level perimeter. I put a line over here. This is not a level line, it's just an approximate height. So I know when I'm about that height, it's going to be pitched down. And so I'm going to do the perimeter, and then I stuff the mud under here. Make sure this is really supported well. And then I'm going to fill the inside. So first thing I'm going to do is compact all the mud. So I got a fairly compact and even line of mud or screed, and then I'm going to make it perfectly level using my level and tamping it down till I get a perfectly level mud bed. And then from there I'll go around to all the other walls, so I have all 4 walls where I have a perfectly level perimeter. Okay, so here I'm checking to see that I have a good pitch towards the drain. The pitch wants to be at least a 1/4 inch per foot. It could be more if you like, but it should be at the very least a 1/4 inch per foot. And I'm checking from corner to the drain and just making sure, like I said, that there's a good pitch. So to understand what a 1/4 inch per foot fall means, the drain is going to be lower than the perimeter of the shower by a 1/4 inch for every foot. So if the drain is set at 2 inches above the floor, that means, and the wall is 2 feet away, that means that the height of the mud at the wall will be a 1/2 inch higher than it is at the drain. And that way you achieve a 1/4 inch per foot pitch. Okay, so I mixed this much wetter, and I'm going to pack it under the thing here. So that it's very important that the bonding flange be completely supported and level. So I'm just tweaking it here a little bit to make sure that it's perfectly level, and I'm making sure that it's fully supported. That way you get an even pitch all the way around to the drain. So with the perimeter being level and the bonding flange being level, you're going to get a nice even pitch all the way around the floor. So this time I decided to do it in this order, to set the drain in the mud before I finish the perimeter. Sometimes I'll do it the other way, all depends on the circumstances. But right now I'm going to finish this perimeter all the way around so I have a perfectly level, even perimeter, and then I'm going to fill the middle down to the drain, and that way I'm going to create my pitch of 1/4 inch per foot. The perimeter is slightly higher than the drain. So because the drain is more to one side than the other, the pitch from the bench seat side to the drain is going to be slightly steeper than the opposite wall, which is a little bit further away. However, the perimeter will be perfectly level. Okay, so now I'm going to fill in the middle, and I'm going to do that by packing all the mud down all the way to the drain in that area where you see there, and then I'm going to I pack it down nice and tight, and then I'm going to screed from the perimeter to the drain, and that'll automatically give me the pitch that I need because the perimeter is higher than the drain. And I'm going to continue that all the way around, and because the perimeter is level, I keep on saying that, but because the perimeter is level and the drain is lower, I'm going to get the right pitch, continuous pitch all the way around the floor. From one side to the other it'll be a little bit steeper than the other, but it'll all be even because I'm going around in a circle, and I'm screening from a level perimeter to the drain. Okay, so I'm going to continue this until I get it all filled in, and in a little bit I'm going to give you a close-up look at exactly what I'm doing. Okay, so here it is. I put the camera right on the mud so that I can give you guys a close-up look at exactly what I'm doing here. Okay, so the next video will be the Curdy membrane, the Curdy band, and flood test. Now that I've got the mud in, I'm going to install the Curdy membrane and the Curdy band to make it completely waterproof. Don't have to wait any length of time. You can do this the next day. You don't have to wait a period of time for the mud to cure or anything like that. You can actually install it the very next day. You always want to get a 2-inch overlap on any seams and use the Cody trowel with it, which is an 8x8 square notch trowel. You can use a V-notch trowel. I forget the exact size because I always use square notch Cody trowel. And make sure you don't leave any globs when you're spreading the thin set, and you press it into the thin set really good and get good transfer to the membrane. So I always dry lay everything and cut everything in so that I know everything's gonna fit and I have all the pieces. So once I've done that, it's time to cut the hole for the drain. Now in the Cody drain kit, there's going to be a couple of templates, paper templates. One is for the hole that you cut in the floor, and the other one is for the hole you cut in the membrane for the drain. So use that template to, like I'm doing here, to mark out the hole for the bonding flange. Okay, so once I got it cut out, I'm going to put it back into place and line everything up, and then I'm going to fold it back and cement it down. I'm using the Cody trowel, which is an 1/8 inch by 1/8 inch by 1/8 inch square notch trowel. But I always flat trowel the surface that I'm applying the thin set, and that is to key in the thin set, and then I will notch out the thin set to gauge it out the correct depth of thin set for the Cody membrane. So I'm going to roll the membrane back into the thin set. Here I'm using a float to push the membrane into the thin set and get the transfer of thin set to the membrane. And you want to use something that's not going to damage the material, the Cody membrane. I will also go over this with a pie knife carefully. You don't want to put a rip or a tear in the membrane. So here I'm using a putty knife, a wide putty knife, to smooth it off even more. You want to be very careful that you don't rip the membrane or put a hole in it. And this is just the step that I do to make sure that I got no bumps or humps or accumulation of thin set in any one spot. Just make sure it's nice and smoothed out. Now, because this shower floor was wider than the actual membrane, I'm piecing it in. I'm just using some scraps of Cody membrane, and I'm going over the thin set and making sure that I get a 2-inch overlap at the seams in all directions. Okay, so I got one side done. Fold back the other side and do exactly the same thing, making sure I get good coverage of the membrane and good transfer. So in the corners here, I'm going to use the prefabricated corners that come with the drain kit. In the drain kit, you're going to get 4 inside corners and 2 outside corners. The outside corners you use for the curve. And so you use the same trowel, same thin set. You put the you spread your thin set and then put your corner in and smooth it into the thin set with a putty knife. Most times it's better to use 2 putty knives, one to hold the corner in place and the other one to smooth it into the thin set. The order which you do these steps does not matter. You can put your corners in first and then put the cutty band, or you can put the cutty band and then do the corners. Doesn't matter which way you do it. So this is the 5-inch cutty band that I'm using. If you wanted to, you could even put the corners and cutty band in before you put your membrane on the shower floor. Does not matter. As long as there's a 2-inch overlap, you can put them in any order you like. When you cut your piece of cutty band for the length, you don't have to go all the way into the corner. You just always need to have a 2-inch overlap. So going all the way into the corner is going to give you more buildup. So you spread your thin set and then place your piece of cutty band in. You can crease it if you want, if that helps you, to get a flat, even seam. And once again, with your putty knife, you press it in. Always being careful not to tear the membrane. So just because I have a double layer of cutty band, I'm using a little thin set to feather it out so I get a nice smooth transition, because it's going to be small tile on the floor. It's actually going to be river rock. I don't need to do it on the walls because I have very large tile. Okay, so that's it. All done. Let it dry. Okay, so this has had the weekend to set, and now I'm flood testing it for 24 hours, and then we can start installing some tile. Okay, so I cut all these tiles on the wet saw This is a real stone, so it's going to be really difficult to try and cut it on a tile cutter. And if you get any loose pieces, I usually put a piece of tape on it to hold it in place, and then I will peel the tape off as I'm installing it. And as you can see, I have a nice clean line up against the wall, and the wall tile will sit on top of this. Okay, so these are the three components to the Schluter drain. This here snaps on here, like that. Then this goes through here, like that. And then it's going to go like there. And this, you can move this around a bit, a little bit of adjustment, and you can move it up and down a little bit. So I'm just going to leave it like this for now, and I'm going to lay out the tile, see how the tile falls, and then position this where it needs to go. You'll see in a minute. So, and this all gets filled with thin set here, and I'm going to put blue tape on here just to protect this a little bit, and then I'm going to start laying tile floor. So usually when I'm doing a shower floor, I will fit the whole shower floor dry. In other words, dry lay it. Most shower floors are a manageable size, so you can do this. If you've got a really big floor, it becomes a little more difficult, but most times it's rather easy to do. The floor is a manageable size and you can fit it in. Now, as I'm going along, I'm going to just rough cut the drain in, and once I get the whole shower floor all dry laid, I'm going to cut the pieces and fit to the drain. So this particular tile fit very well together. The sheets, when you put them together, you couldn't see any sheet lines. It was a very good fit. It was a very good quality tile. However, many times when you have these pebble tile sheets, they don't fit together very well, and you end up seeing all the sheet lines. In that case, I would peel all the tiles off and then lay the tiles in one at a time. When you do it that way, when you fit the tiles one at a time, you have no cutting. It doesn't take that much longer. Many times the pebbles will come off the sheets very easily. Sometimes they're a little bit harder, but it's well worth the effort. If you don't peel the tiles off the sheet when the sheets don't fit together very well, you will see sheet lines and it doesn't look very good at all. Test, fit your sheets together, see if they fit well, and then decide what you're going to do. Okay, so because there's going to be wall tile on top of this floor tile, you don't have to get a real precise measurement. You just want to make sure that when you put the wall tile on, it's going to cover the cut piece of the floor tile. You don't want to cut it tight to the wall. You want to leave a little bit of room for expansion and contraction. And like I said, you don't have to be precise in these measurements because you're not going to see these cut tiles. If you were cutting the tile up against the finished wall, then you would have to take more precise measurements. But in this case, a rough cut to approximately the right size will be fine as long as the finished wall tile covers that edge. So now that my whole floor tile is cut in around the perimeter, I'm going to fit the drain, and I'm going to fit precisely where it needs to be. And the best way to do this is just like I'm doing it now. Just use your drain and put your tiles in place, and then measure and mark the tiles and cut them. Square drains are going to be a lot easier to do than round drains. but basically it's the same process. So another thing to remember is once you've cut the tile, you want to stone the edge. And by stoning the edge, as you're going to see here, is just to rub the edge of the stone where you cut it with the rubbing stone. That will take off any sharp edges, so it'll be safe to walk on. And when you know, because you're going to be in the shell with bare feet, so you don't want to have any sharp edges. So you just fit the hole straight in, and then once that's done, you can start cementing it down. When you're installing tile, you never want to get cheap thinset. Always spend a little more money and get a quality thinset. So anyway, I'm going to cement, as you can see, I picked up one roll. Because I left the rest of the floor down, which is just dry fitted, I'm going to know exactly and precisely where the tiles fit. And it's going to go exactly where it was before. See how I placed the tiles on top of the other tiles, which are just dry laid there. So I'm going to carefully put them into place, and then I'm going to beat them in with a rubber float. You're going to see that in a second. But one thing I want to mention here too is the size of the trowel. You want to have the correct size of the trowel so that when you lay the tile into the thinset, you're going to get good transfer to the back of the tile. Now these mosaic tiles, you can't really back butter them because you're going to have a big huge mess. So you want to make sure you have an adequate size trowel so that you get good even coverage on the back of the tile. What you do is you're going to trowel out some cement, you're going to lay it in, then you're going to pick up one corner to see what your coverage is. If the coverage is not sufficient, you're going to move up to a bigger trowel. Here I'm looking at the coverage, and I see that I've got good coverage, so I'm going to keep going, and I'm beating it in with the flow.
So you might ask, what kind of thinset mortar should you use? Well, that's a good question. I would suggest that you use the mortar that is recommended by the manufacturer of the system that you're using. In this case, it would be either Schluter Set, which is an unmodified mortar, or Schluter All Set, which is a premium modified mortar. That doesn't mean you can't use other mortars. You just want to make sure that if you do use another manufacturer's mortar, that it is compatible with the system you're using. In this case, I'm using Schluter All Set because that's the brand of the system that I'm using to build this steam shower.
So if you get some squeeze through, the thinset comes through the grout lines, you want to clean that up while the thinset is still fresh, because it's going to be a lot harder when thinset cures. So a brush can really help with this. Use a brush to clean out the joints, the grout joints, and then wipe it down with a sponge, and then repeat if you have to. You just want to make sure you clear those grout joints, otherwise when you go to grout it, it's going to show through and you're going to really have a hard time. Sometimes even a toothbrush will work. I generally put a brush in my tool bucket. So once you got that first row or two rows or whatever you did in place, it's time to pick up some more tile. And generally what I'll do is I'll pick up the tiles and arrange them so that I know exactly where each sheet goes when I'm trying to put them back. If the tile is a square tile, it's not quite as difficult. You can just stack them, but when it's sheets like this, you probably want to arrange them so that you know exactly where each sheet goes. So you're going to pick up enough so that you can reach comfortably, and then you're going to move on. You're going to cement that down, and then you're going to move on to the next section. You could probably do like 1 or 2 rows and then pick up the rest. On a larger floor, you probably want to do it in sections. Okay, so once you get to the drain, and you're gonna completely fill where the flange is with thinset. You don't want to, get thinset in the actual drain hole, but around where the bonding flange is, you want to fill that with thinset. You're gonna press your drain in, and then you're gonna add some more cement, and you want the thinset to go up into the back of the grate assembly, so that that's completely filled. Because the thinset is what is going to hold the drain in place. So when I push this down to get exactly even with the tile, a little bit might squeeze through, but you're just going to deal with that and you're going to clean it up. Okay, so I got the tile around the drain in. Now I'm going to push the drain down into position so it's even with the surface of the tile. I want to keep it as level as possible, and I want to keep it so that the tile is either just slightly above the drain or perfectly even. You don't want the drain grate being above the surface of the tile. So what I forgot to show is when I picked up the pieces that were cut around the drain, I put them on a piece of curdy board, and in the position that they fit around the drain. If you just pick them up and put them aside, you're going to have a hard time trying to figure out where each piece goes. This way you know exactly where they go because it's in the corresponding position on the board. And you're going to put them in and make sure that the pieces are exactly even with the top of the drain, or they are just slightly, ever so slightly above. You don't want the drain grate being higher than the tile, because then the water won't drain properly. And so you're going to put these in and then clean it up as you go along. And there you have it. One river rock shower floor installed. Okay, so as you can see, I've already spread some thin set and I already got one tile on. The thin set I'm using is an LFT thin set. It's made for large and heavy tiles. So the thin set on the wall is all spread and evenly notched in one direction. I like to go up and down. Some guys like to go left to right. I like to go up and down in most cases. Because I'm not using a really large trowel, I'm also notching the back of the tile with the same thin set. That way I get complete transfer of the thin set to the tile, because I'm back bottling it, and the notches are going to go in the same direction as the notches on the wall. So when I put the tile on the wall, the notches are going to be in the same direction. You don't want them going in opposite directions. You don't want to do like a crosshatch. You want them to go in the same direction. So when you push the tile in, it's going to embed into the thin set, and the trowel lines are going to interlock and not cross over each other. Very important, because you want to. This is a steam shower and it's a wet area. The recommended coverage for a thin set in a wet area is 95 to 100%. On a dry area, it can be usually 80 to 85%. But in a wet area, you want to get as complete a transfer of thin set as possible. Also, this first row of tile is very critical. It sets the base for the entire wall. So you want to get that as perfectly plumb, perfectly flat, and perfectly level as possible. If your base tile is not perfect, then you're going to have trouble trying to keep the tile above it straight and perfect. Well, on this first row, I always spend extra time to get it exactly right. So now I got my first row of tile on the bottom, perfectly flat, perfectly level, and perfectly plumb. So when I build on top of that, I know that I can, if I follow that, the rest of the wall will be the same. So I spread my thin set, get it, embed the tile, and then I'm going to use my level to check to see that I have full contact along both tiles from top to bottom. And that way I know that it is perfectly plumb and in plane with the tile that I just installed. And then when I get to the tile beside it, I'm going to do the same thing and put the level across. So now I'm going to use my margin trowel to clear the thin set right up against the edge of the tile. That way when I put the other tile in, I won't have any squeeze through in the grout line. Now because this is such a large tile, I'm going to put 2 clips along the short edge and 3 along the long edge. That way I can get some real good leverage into bringing the tiles into plane. And these systems will usually always pull the tile into the thin set and not the tile away from the thin set. I get a lot of comments where people say, well, why, it's going to lift the tile, pull the tile up. It doesn't actually work that way. These leveling systems pull the tile down and into the thin set, not away from the thin set. Now, as I said earlier, you always want to spread your thin set so the lines, the notches of the thin set always go in one direction. And the reason you do that is because you want to be able to collapse those lines into each other when you press the tile into the thin set. If you have swirls or lines going in multiple directions, that's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to do. Lines going in several directions or swirls in the thin set will trap air and make the thin set impossible to collapse. So you keep the lines going in one direction, so with a back and forth motion or a wiggling of the tile, you can get those lines to collapse and get very good coverage on the tile. So another thing to remember, when you're going around a corner in a change of plane, you don't butt the tile on one wall tight against the tile of the other wall. You want to leave a small gap. I'll sometimes use wedges to maintain that gap, sometimes I won't, but you want to make sure that the gap is there, and that's going to be filled with a flexible caulk or sealant. The sealant that I usually use is by the same manufacturer and is usually the same color as the grout, so that you get a good color match. Sometimes it's not perfect, but it's pretty close. Okay, so I got a couple of walls done. These have been able to set overnight, and now it's going to be time to knock off these clips and do a little cleanup. So I'm going to use a rubber mallet to knock off these clips, and if you've kept your grout lines clean and you've done everything right, all the clips will break off cleanly. So this bronze circle you see here that I'm measuring around. So it's going to have a faceplate on it, but there's not a lot of play um, that will, to cover any errors. So I have to get it as close and as perfect as possible. And so I'm just marking it out, and this is one way of doing it. You can take measurements. I like usually to do it this way, and just transfer my marks. So sometimes you come to a tile that presents a bit of a challenge. Now this one here had multiple holes in it, and it had to be exactly in the right position. And so I got this one exactly right. But if you notice here, along this edge here, there's not a lot of thinset there. I will backfill that with a margin trowel before I put the next tile in. Just gotta. Sometimes there's a lot of things to take care of, and you want to make sure that you get good coverage on the back of the tile. And by doing that, I will support that edge. So no trim, by trim I mean bull nose, was available for this tile. So I could have used a Schluter metal along the exposed edges, but instead, because this was a through body porcelain tile, which means that the whole tile is all the same color all the way through, I decided with the client that we would just polish the edges and finish all the exposed edges that way. So these edges along the jambs and any other exposed edge were all polished. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll use some tape. In this case it's actually Nashua tape, which is an aluminum tape, and I'll wrap the edge with it, put the spacer in where it needs to be, usually some wedges, and then adhere the tape, wrap it around the corner, and that will usually hold the tile in place pretty firmly. And especially when you're going in and out of the jam and you're working around it, it just helps avoid the tile moving if you bump it accidentally. And so that's how I usually handle these corners, or anywhere there's a bull nose that goes up against the tile. Okay, so any horizontal plane that's in the shower needs to tilt towards the drain. So the bench seat, this bench seat needs to be slightly tilted towards the drain. So when any water that gets on it will run off and not towards the back wall. So that's very important. You don't want water standing anywhere. You want it to always to run off the horizontal surface and towards the drain. Okay, so that's all the tile in the shower stall. Okay, so this accent wall really is not going to see any water. But the backboard that I installed was Durock, and it's a cementitious backboard. And also, I'm giving it a coat of a couple of coats of Aqua Defense, even though it's really not in a wet area. You might get a little splash from the tub, but it's really not in a wet area. I like to coat it for a couple of reasons. Number one, it gives a nicer surface to tile over. Number two, because the backboard is very thirsty, if you don't coat it, it just sucks the moisture right out of the thin set. So applying a couple of coats of Aqua Defense, which is a waterproofing membrane, and a cleavage membrane or a crack isolation membrane. So what that does is it helps maintain the moisture in the thin set as you're installing the tile, and stops the backboard from drawing the moisture out of the thin set as you're working. It gives you a little more time to be able to work. You always have to be careful that the thin set doesn't skin over or it dries before you can get the tile on it. This actually helps. And then the other reason that I do it is because this is actually a crack isolation membrane, and because the mosaic tile that I'm putting up is actually a glass stone mix. I like to have the cleavage membrane underneath so it absorbs a little of the movement that's present in the wall and avoids cracks. So that's a couple of reasons that I like to do it. Don't have to install waterproofing if you don't want, but I think it's a good idea. Actually, some manufacturers actually do. Some glass tile manufacturers actually recommend that you do this, but this tile is actually a glass stone mix, so it's not really absolutely necessary, but it can't hurt. So as you can see here, I installed a ledger board so that I'm going to leave it at the bottom row of tile, and I set the ledger board so that once I get my Dietrich heat mat down and the tile, it's going to be at the height of a full tile. So all I have to do is just get that sheet of mosaic tile, cement, spread some cement and just place it in. And the only two cuts I'll have to make will be at the door jamb and at the where it meets the other wall. So this particular mosaic tile, as I said, is a stone glass tile mix, and the top surface of the front of the tile is actually not very flat at all. It's actually quite rough. Some of the tiles protrude above the surface of the tile, and it gives a really rustic, rough, uneven look. You want to make sure that you really press it in and get the tile to embed into the thin set. What I usually do is get a float and use my rubber float to press the tiles into the thin set. And you want to get as good coverage as possible, so you want to use the correct size trowel, and the trowel you're going to use is not too big that when you place the tile into the thin set that it's going to squeeze through the grout joints, but big enough so that the back of the tile gets good coverage and is well embedded into the thin set. So if you're not careful with these mosaic tiles, what can happen is you can get a bow in the wall. So to avoid that, I'm using my laser level as a reference line so that I know that I'm keeping a straight, level line as I move up the wall. Now, what I do is I go up a couple of rows at a time with the laser level so that I have that reference line all the time to make sure that I'm keeping the tile straight. If you don't have a level line, a laser, you can use just a regular level and put a pencil line or a line that you chalk line so that you can see that you're keeping your tiles straight and level and even. Okay, so as I'm going along, as I get a few sheets up, I got these little wedges that I'm putting in between the sheets to help maintain an even grout line. The tiles, the grout lines within the sheets themselves are not absolutely perfect. But you want to try and keep it somewhat even so it looks decent. This tile is supposed to have kind of a rustic look, so it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but you want to make it look nice. So because there's only 2 cuts need to be made on this wall at the jamb, I just start with a straight cut, and then when I get to the corner wall, I just measure the tile, the length it needs to be, mark it, and then I'm just going to take it to my wet saw and cut it. So the backing that keeps these tiles together can sometimes be a problem. On some mosaic tiles, once the backing gets wet, the tiles can quickly come loose and fall off of the mesh. Others, it's not affected by water, so you're just going to have to make a cut and see what happens. In any case, you want to make sure that you dry the tile before you stick it on the wall, because if you put a wet tile on the wall, a lot of times the adhesive won't transfer to the tile and adhere to the wall. So you want to make sure you dry it off before you stick it on the wall. And even more so if the backing makes the tile come loose when it gets wet. So just try it out and see what happens. So as you can see, just keep on going, work your way up the wall, cut around the if you've got like an electrical box, you just cut around it. It doesn't have to be perfect because the faceplate will cover the cuts, so you just have to make sure that any cuts that you make are buried will be buried under the faceplate. So just keep on moving along and install your tile with 1 or 2 rows at a time until you get to the top. And you'll also notice that I always have the trowel lines of my thin set always going even in one direction. So there's no swirls and there's no, back and forth. It's always either, most of the time it's just like straight up and down. And the reason for that is because it promotes optimal coverage of the thin set. Okay, so this is a sealer that I'm going to use for my tile. Okay, so because this tile is a natural stone, it's actually a natural stone glass mix, I'm going to seal it. And what that does is protects the tile. It stops the tile from getting stained if there should be any bleed through of dyes in the grout. It'll make it easier to clean, and it'll help with the haze. And so and then also, once it's all finished, it'll help it from getting stained once the bathroom is in use. So it's actually very easy to put on. You just wipe it on, let it sit for a few minutes, usually 3 to 5 minutes, and then you just wipe it off. These grout sealers also will work as a grout release, and because this is very rough tile, it's a very uneven surface. That will also help with cleaning the tile as you wash it. Okay, so the only thing left for this wall is to grout. Now, generally, grout lines an 1/8 of an inch or less will get unsanded grout. Grout lines an 1/8 of an inch or more will get sanded grout. So the grout lines that are an 1/8 can go either or, but generally I like to use a sanded grout on the grout lines that are an 1/8 of an inch, unless there is a reason not to use sanded grout, like a delicate tile that would get scratched by the sand in the grout. So when you choose a grout, you're going to have to decide on whether you're just going to go with a standard grout, or you're going to use a standard grout and put an additive in it to make it stain resistant, or get an advanced grout. A lot of the advanced grouts don't come in unsanded, so if you've got a delicate tile that can be scratched by the sand in the grout, then you're going to have to make a decision on whether you want to take a chance or use something else, which would be unsanded. But basically what you do is you're going to use your float on a low angle to push the grout into the grout lines, and then you're going to scrape off as much as possible by breaking the grout across the tile at a very high angle to get off as much as possible. Okay, so I'm going to be installing Nitra Heat. This is the uncoupling mat with the, see the knobs? The wire goes in between these knobs. That's shown in this diagram here, but you're going to see me do it. The wire, which you're going to open up in a minute, and this is the touchscreen programmable thermostat, and the three together make up an electric heated floor. This Nitra mat still maintains the uncoupling and all the other things that the regular Nitra has, except it incorporates a space for the wire in the mat so that you have a flat surface to tile over without having to put any self-levelers or make adjustments of any kind. Just snake the wire into the mat and tile it. So this is it, and this is what I'm going to be installing. Because I'm going over OSB here, I'm going to install the mat with a polymer modified thin set. Okay, so you just use a utility knife to cut it. I'm going to cut the rest of this in. But you want these pucks to line up, that way the wire, these pucks here, that way the wire goes straight through and it doesn't have to jog. Okay, so I'm going to roll it back, roll these back. Wipe it down with a damp sponge. What that does, it saves dust off and gives it plywood a drink. Exactly what it needs. Quarter-inch square notch trowel. First I'm going to go with the flat side to key it in, and then I'm going to flip it and use the notch side. If you're going over plywood, you want to use a modified thin set to install the mat onto the plywood. The kind of thin set you would use, look for A118.11 or A118.15. They're the two modified versions of thin set that you can use to install the Nitra mat on a wood subfloor. If you're going over a concrete subfloor, then any thin set will work. You want to get a quality thin set, but any thin set will work. Okay, now I'm going to roll it back. And I smooth it in with an old wooden trowel. So I'll do the rest of it. So this is the wire. This one's 240 volts. Covers 85.3 square feet. Put the wire in the pucks there. You would have to do every three spacing, every three pucks, 1, 2, 3. But now you have the option of doing 2, 3 alternating spacing. So you could do 3 spaces, 1, 2, 3, and then 2 spaces, then 3 spaces, then 2 spaces, then 3 spaces. So alternating 2, 3 spaces. That just gives some more heat output. The same wire, you can use the same wire to do either spacing. Now the system is composed of 3 parts: the Nitra mat, the thermostat, and the wire itself. You get 2 sensor wires. You only need one, but you install both so you have a backup, and then you
and then you only connect, the thermostat's going over here, but so you only connect one of the sensor wires and the other one is as a backup. So in the newer version, you only need a multimeter, but if you have a mega ohm meter, that will give you 5 years extra warranty. So you don't have to have that, you don't have to test it with that, but if you do test it with that, you get more warranty. This is the only meter that you need, a multimeter, to test the wire and record all the results. So we have two sensor wires. We have the directions. I can put this aside. Now, all connections here, this has to be done by a licensed electrician. So, let's unwrap this and test it. There's a label on here, and it tells you the ohms that we need to test for, and it has to be within 10% of this number. We're going to test that in a second. It's the same thing that's on the wire, so you keep these. It's what we need to fill out. Okay, so got the number here and put it over here. Factory value is 17.7 ohms, and I put that there. And we're going to test the wire. We're going to test the wire 3 times. Once when we take it out of the box. Once after we get it in the mat here, over here. And the 3rd time after the tile's installed. So let's test this right now and see what the ohms are. If it matches this, it has to be within 10% of 17.7. So I got the alligator clips connected to the wires, one to one side, one to the other. Use alligator clips if you can, it makes your life a lot easier. So I'm going to put this, so it's already at 200 ohms. And it's 17.9, 17.8, 17. So that's within 10% of the factory value of 17.7. So this wire is good. So that's that test. 17.8 ohms. So that's the conductor resistance test. Now we're going to do the conductor and ground. So I'm going to set this to the alarm. It's going to make a sound if you touch these together. You're going to put one wire on one lead, and then we're going to put the other on the ground wire. And so that should say I or OL. It says I, and it actually tells you right here I or O, infinity or overload. So that test is a pass also. So I'm going to put I. These 2 tests are the only 2 required tests. This one here is you need a mega ohm meter to do this test, and it's not actually required, but you get extra warranty if you do it. So I'm going to actually do it. Okay, so this is a mega ohm meter. Once again, alligator clips. So you're going to put one of the alligator clips on the lead, and you're going to put the other one on the ground wire. I'm going to set these to 1,000 volts and test. You want it to go over 1,000. So this test is good. The megalometer test is good. So you don't want to touch these wires because that sends 1,000 volts through the wires, so you don't want to touch them as it's discharging. So it says it right here, equal to or greater than 1 gigaohm, and it passed that. As you saw, it was 1,800 and whatever. So those two tests are done. So now we got to test these. Now, if these two have been in different, because these are sensors, so it measures the temperature. So if you kept one in the truck and one was in the house, they're going to be different temperatures. They're going to have different readings. Now these have been sitting here for over an hour, so they should be more or less at the same temperature, but we'll see. So the temperature in here is about 70 degrees in here. So once again, connect one to one side, one to the other. The temperature, as I said, is about 70 degrees. So you got some temperature ranges here. So we're between this range here, 68 and 77. So it should be somewhere between 12 and 10. So we got them connected. Gonna put this on 20K. And we're at 11.8. So 11.8. So that's about right. Test the other one. And that's about the same. Okay, so I recorded all those values. The testing is done for now. We can put the wire in the mat and then we'll test it again. This is the cold lead. This part here, this black part. And that there, this here is the cold splice. This has to be buried in under the tile in the thin set, and this is the wire that goes in the mat, and this is the wire that goes up the wall. So the rule is you have to stay 3 inches away from a wall at least. I'm staying 6 inches away. I'll tell you why in a second. Over here there's a vanity. This is the tub area. The tub is actually going to go to this mark here. So I'm staying 3 inches away from that. You can't put wire under a fixed object where there's no airflow. And let's just say this square right here was your vent in the floor. Then you would stay 8 inches away all the way around from that. You have to be a distance of 8 inches away. If you have a wall, like a radiator, if you had a radiator along that wall, you would stay 8 inches away from that too. So the reason that I'm staying 6 inches away is to give me extra room to put excess wire if I have it. Now that wire there will cover 64 square feet on a 3 puck spacing, and it'll cover 54 square feet on a 3-2 spacing. This is the reason why I leave the 6 inches, just in case you're running long on the wire. That gives you another run all the way around that you can do to eat up that wire. So let's cut in this lead and get it ready. So this is the cold splice from the cold to the hot. This has to be buried under the tile. This goes up the wall. All the rest of this goes under the tile. So I snaked the wire up through the conduit, and so I'm going to cut this area. To push the wire in, you can either use your fingers like that, but use something plastic. It could be a rubber float, it could be a wooden trowel, it could be a plastic trowel, and just push it in. Okay, so this is the 2-3 spacing. So I got 2, 3. So 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2. You can't do 2, 2, and you definitely can't do 1, 1. So always got you can do 3, 3 if you want, or you can do 3, 2. You can't do 2, 2, 2, and you definitely can't do 1, 2, and absolutely not 1, 1. The wire will overheat. So it's either 3, 2 spacing or 3, 3 spacing, and in the book it'll have the square footage that'll cover for each wire, what the square footage it will cover in each configuration. So if you make a mistake, just pull it right up and redo it. So anyway, you get the idea. Okay, so the wire's all down. I'm going to test again. The sensor wires. Put in the sensor wires, one here, but it has to be at least a foot in. So both of them are in, and but you're only going to connect one. You snaked it through the wall, and the wire and the sensors, they actually can all go through the same conduit. They don't have to be separated. It used to be that they would say that to separate them, but that's not the case anymore. So it can go through the same conduit. Okay, so I'm gonna test it a second time. Okay, so after the installation of the floor tile is complete, test for the third time, but do not put the heating system into service for at least 10 days.
This is Schluter Dietrich heat. It's an uncoupling mat. So you want to make sure that you fill all the cavities and voids in the uncoupling mat completely. It's very important that this be done, and it's actually quite easy with the Dietrich heat mat. And then trowel out the thin set and gauge it with the notch side of the trowel. Usually you want to go have the lines of the trowels going all in one direction. So you also want to keep the angle of the trowel always pretty consistent, so that you're not changing the depth of the notches, so they're always the same depth, and that'll help keep the tiles aligned as far as height relative to each other. And you want to have always straight lines for the thin set. That way you can collapse the bridges. If you get swirls, then you can't collapse the bridges of the thin set, and you won't get proper coverage. Proper coverage for an interior installation in a dry area is 80%. In a wet area, it's 95%. Although backbuttering is not absolutely required, I pretty much do it all the time, unless it's a very small tile or if it's a mosaic tile. It's a very good idea because it'll key the thin set into the back of the tile. What keying means is actually it pushes the thin set into the grooves and crevices of the tile, so you get a better bond. So it's actually always a good idea to do, and I do it pretty much all the time, unless there's a specific reason not to. But most of the time when I install large format tiles, I'll use a leveling system, or I like to refer to them as lippage systems. And I just want to be perfectly clear about these systems. These systems are not meant to compensate for bad floor prep or uneven floors or wavy floors. They are meant to control lippage, nothing else. They're meant to tune the lippage between tiles. If you're going to use them, try and use them to straighten out a floor, it's not going to work. Then that's not the purpose of these systems. Now, the thing about these leveling systems is you've got a clip that goes between the tiles, and you want to make sure you keep your grout lines clear so when you break them off, they break off cleanly and you're not breaking bases. So it's very important, not with just this system, but with any system, to keep your grout lines clear. And that's what you see me doing here is I'm raking the sides of the tile. When I put the tile in, I'm not squeezing thin set between the grout lines and up between the grout lines. Compromise the edge of the tile, because as you're pushing the tile down, you're going to be pushing thin set out towards the edges of the tile, and you will get complete coverage. Another important thing to keep in mind when you're installing tile is you want to leave adequate room for expansion and contraction. Do not install your tile so it's tight up against the wall. If you take your baseboard off, then you can leave some room at the wall, and then when you put your baseboard on, then it'll cover that gap and you'll have adequate room for expansion and contraction. If the baseboard is on, then you're going to still leave that room, and then when you go to grout, you're going to actually caulk that joint so that you have a soft joint at the wall. Very important. Room be left for expansion and contraction. So just one little interesting tidbit of information here is that years ago you didn't see any of these leveling systems, and people would just, installers would just use their fingertips to feel that the tiles are aligned properly and that there's one's not sticking up. Today tiles are getting much bigger, and that has caused the development of these tile tuning systems, or these lippage systems or leveling systems, to help with the installation of the tile to avoid lippage. Now, because the tiles are so big now, they're actually not flat. They usually have a crown in the middle of the tile. So there's tiles even if you look on the box of the tile, most times on the boxes of the tile, it'll have that you're supposed to stagger these tiles by a third, at the very most a third, and you're not supposed to put them in a half. I'm actually doing that on this installation. I am putting it at a third. Now, because of the size of the tiles, these are actually very helpful for installing a tile and getting a tile flat. So here you also see me using a cross laser. This is specifically made for floors, and that is what helps you line up your lines as it go across the tile. You don't have to use it. You can use a chalk line, or you can use a straight edge, or you can use something, but a laser level will actually help keep your tiles aligned properly, so that the staggers actually, when you look down the floor, all the staggered lines will line up properly. So you can't finish every install in the same day. But because I'm using a lippage system here, or a leveling system, I want to have the clips set into the tiles, or under the tiles, for the next day. So if you just set the clips under the tile, at the edge of the tile for the day, and just walk away from it, as the thin set dries, it might push those clips out. So when you come back the next day and try and set your tile, you might have a wider grout line. So I will scrape any residual thin set off the floor and get it as clean as possible. And then to hold the clips in place, what I'll do is get some scrap tile, place it up against the uh, tile, finished edge of the tile where I'm leaving it for the day, and put the wedge in. So the next day when I come back, as you can see here, I'll pull out the scrap tile and my clips will be in place, perfectly aligned and ready to start tiling. And they won't have moved because the wedges have held it in place. So you're going to be ready to go. So now, the next day, I'm going to remove all my clips. And what you do is you get a rubber mallet, or if you've got some hard steel-toed shoes, you can kick them. But you get a rubber mallet and you just hit the clips and wedges in the same direction as the grout line. You don't want to go across, but you want to go in the same direction, in line with the grout line. And if you've kept your grout lines clear, they will all break off cleanly. So when you finish your tile in a doorway where it's going to meet another uh, flooring material like carpet or hardwood or whatever, it's always a good idea to install a metal to protect the edge of the tile. So here I'm using a Schluter metal. It's actually Schluter sheen, and you cut it to length. You spread your thin set. You insert your metal, and then you fill the metal leading edge that goes under the tile with thin set. You're gonna make sure that it is filled with thin set, and that it's gonna, when you put your tile on, you're gonna get proper coverage. A lot of these metals are installed incorrectly because they'll just place the metal and place the tile. No, you want to make sure you have adequate thin set on the leading edge of the metal that goes under the tile, so that when you press your tile in, it'll be completely embedded in the thin set. So once you've finished your tile install, you've cleaned up and you left adequate time for the mortar to dry under the tile, it's time to grout. Today there are many different kinds of grouts available. You still have your standard cementitious grouts with you just mix. Then you have additives that you can add to those grouts which make them more stain resistant. Then you've got advanced cementitious grouts which are very stain resistant. And you've got urethane grouts, you've got epoxy grouts. There's a million different choices of grouts. So pick the one that works best for you. Here, in this one here, I think I'm using an advanced stain resistant grout. Read the directions carefully. Always mix according to the directions, because some of these grouts have very specific amounts of water to add to them, so that you get the proper properties of the grout, so the grout will perform as advertised. In general, however, you're going to spread your grout. You're going to spread a certain area of grout, and then you're going to let it dry for a certain amount of time. Sometimes, depending on the grout you use, it's going to be very little time, and you can only spread a very small area. Other times you're going to spread a lot more area and let it dry for a certain amount of time. As I said, check the instructions of the grout so you don't run into trouble. But in general, you spread your area, press the grout in holding the float at a very low angle, and then once you've got a little bit of an area spread, you lift the grout to a very high angle so that you scrape off as much as possible. Then, so you spread your area, and then you move on to the next step. So once you spread your grout, you let it dry the appropriate amount of time. It's time to wash off. And generally the way I do it is I will work on an area and I'll clean off the tile and I'll clean off, work the grout line to get it nice and even. Sometimes that means going across on a diagonal, sometimes it means going along with the grout line. You're just going to have to see what works best. So what I find that works best is as you're cleaning up and you've scrubbed your tile and you got your grout line just the way you want it, and now you're going to do a final pass with the water. You're going to always wring out your sponge have as little water on it as possible. You want to keep it as dry as possible, just damp really. But then as you're doing your final swipes of the sponge stage of the grouting, you're going to pull your sponge in one direction, not going back and forth. Just pull it in one direction, flip it over, and then do another section. Always pull in one direction. If you go back and forth as you pull it the first time, you're taking the haze off. If you go back again without lifting the sponge and turning it, you are going to put the haze back on. So for the final stage of the initial cleanup is to always pull the sponge in one direction and not go back and forth. Once you've done your initial wash, you're going to let it dry and haze over. You're not going to let the grout set. You're just going to let the surface of the tile dry, and then you're going to go back with some clean water and do another wash. And you've got to always keep pulling the sponge in one direction without going back and forth. And this will generally leave the floor very clean. So this is the finished floor just after cleaning up, and it's had time for the floor to dry a bit. And now they just have to install the toilet, the vanity, or the plumbing fixtures, the tub, and everything else. Okay, so this is actually about a month later. I actually just came back to do this little vanity area with this glass tile. There are still no doors on the vanity, but everything else is done. This is actually now a functioning bathroom which the customer has been using for a while now. Completed master bathroom with accent wall, freestanding tub, and a steam shower. And as always, don't forget to subscribe, leave your comments. Also, don't forget, I always leave useful links in the description below. Again, thanks for watching, and hope to see you again in the next video.